Okay, I'm going to start this one off in a certain direction and see if I can keep on course like I do some different times. What you're seeing here is the Nebra Sky Disc or Nebra Star Disc. Some of you may be familiar with it or have seen it before, maybe heard certain things about it and so on. And we're going to discuss part of that now. And we're not going to go as deep as you could go into this aspect, but just simplistic things about it and what just in its essence, if you throw out all the weird ideas, that it still has extreme significance. Now, what you see here is something that is out of proportion instantly to your mind, but it looks like some type of decoration. And that might be it to some people. For the crescent moon that's shown right here is much larger than this thing, which you could say it's a moon, but then why wouldn't it be roughly the same size? Why wouldn't they do that? And why is there a crescent moon right here? Does that have to do with an eclipse and the last of an eclipse showing? All these type of things. On this side there's a bar marker. On this side there's a bar marker. There's multiple dots all around on this thing that looks like it could be stars. And a conspicuous cluster of them that are seen right here. Now, when you look at the representation of this, they apparently replaced some of this gold leaf that was on this here. And from what I hear, it was from the exact area that it comes from, so it matches the gold to it. Some people disagreed with that, all other things. I've heard they try to cover it up with the idea that they found the actual leaf piece that had fallen off that the original guys dug. All kinds of different ideas. Let's go with reality on this thing. This is a bronzed type thing, disc, made, and it is made in a perfect circle. It has gotten ruined in a few places up here in the corner around the edges, but it literally is a perfect circle. This, which is the sun, is not quite a perfect circle. There is a little edging here that makes it not quite a perfect circle. But if you look at it extremely closely, you can see an outline right there, and it comes in and hits that line. And if they would have gone to the line of the piece, it would have been closer to a perfect circle. Regardless, let's continue. There's an arc here, which is perfect on this. The arc that's here that gets thicker in the middle than the outsides is also a perfect arc. And here is a perfect arc, done exactly the same way. And there's a perfect arc down here in the bottom, done, but it's done in a weird way. It has these extra lines onto it. And I've shown you a lot of pictures of ancient cave art and ancient Sumerian reed boats. I did a series about Thor Heyerdahl making it to the New World and things. I've done symbology that shows Egyptian art and this solar boat that takes Ra around for the rest of his journey with Set and Apep and the snake and the whole concept that goes with their idea that happens on a daily basis to make the world go round. But whenever you die, you go through a very similar adventure, and you end up apparently coming about what is Cygnus and going through the Milky Way on a solar boat. Right? Well, let's look and see if we can find some connections to that concept, for they've pretty much, I'm starting to give it away too much, but I want to show you a few aspects of a little piece of video that I found that has it. I don't want to show much of it, just small section. Okay, now you can see that piece that's missing right there out of it, and this is patina, definitely, and that this would have been non-patinaed, and so this looks like it got ripped off perhaps during the excavation they used hammers and stuff to dig into the ground, although in the recreation they show pickaxes, which is not said for some reason. They also refer to the people as robbers as opposed to treasure finders and things, and acted like public doing this type of thing is a bad thing. But you can see it oxidizing here a bit, but it would have been as dark as you can get pretty much out of old bronze, and whenever it turns dark like statues, and so it would have looked not necessarily so jade green and gold, which is a beautiful combination, but black and gold, which is a beautiful combination too. Now, to me, only thing that would have made it more exactly like a star chart would have been if it was done in silver dots, for most of the stars look that way. But when we look up close at it in certain pieces of it, counting the edge dots and looking at that cluster right there showed something too. But in the investigation, they found out many things. Many of the stars had double circles inside below the gold and so on. And so they had a scientist here, and he took and put it into a known star chart, and so trying to match star charts, and this is actually the same type of program that our spacecraft use whenever they try to designate certain stars. Whenever they have them verifying their own navigation, now they're supposed to pin out a few different stars and use that for navigation. Well, if this is here and that's there, then I should be aiming on XY axis and so on. This is how they actually guide the Hubble. The Hubble picks out major stars and it lines up with them, and it says, well, where am I supposed to be looking at exactly in representation to those stars? It's pretty neat, but in the process of going through it, he couldn't find out any. And so there's those stars, but then there's the moon and the crescents and the solar boat aspect of the whole idea. And what did that have to do with it? So if you look in there without patina, you can see how black it really was. And so he kept putting in other information. And then there's that one cluster. And while it doesn't seem to line up to a bunch of other ones, maybe we can identify that cluster, right? And he's an astrologist in a way, but he perhaps didn't at that time have the knowledge of people and the stars that ancient people had in different places around the world, or around the... And there's the whole idea about the solar boat and this zodiacal thing that I've shown you in about, at least a good dozen videos about how it goes with this. And then 3 and 2 and they're offline, or 4 and 3 and they're offline, depending on how many stars. And you look at it, and yeah, it's like a cluster of 11 stars, and it's not quite lined up right. And it doesn't look like what is shown in that depiction necessarily. If you wanted to make that, you'd have to take that star and put it right here. And if you did that, there you'd pretty much have it. But there are many ancient depictions of the Pleiades, and a lot of people over time have recognized that these were drawn in dots, just like stars are just dots. And in that fact, they are zodiacal representations. Stars. In this representation here, we can't even quite see the very top of it. Here you see this solar crescent cradled in this boat. And while a lot of people make the connection, and I do quite frequently, to the idea that a crescent moon, waxing and waning, along with the sun setting and so on, has to do with the symbology of this, But quite often, it may not have to do with it, for these ancient Sumerians had this same reed-type boat. Let's see if I can get just a little bit higher there. And you can see that they've got this offsetting of the same amounts, right? But it gets worse. In this depiction, there's something that looks like a comet flying across the sky, and of course people have used this to say Nibiru and so on, but it may just be a comet. But comets in ancient times were omens that told you things. And where did we get that from? Well, it could be from way back when, and we realize now that it's possible that we are getting some sicknesses and things that happen just whenever a comet goes by, and not just because it goes by, but because we drift through its wake afterwards. Worse than that, though, there appears to be an ancient cometary impact that happened at the end of the Ice Age at the Younger Dryas event. Also, this recreation in this idea has to do with these Pleiades also, for the torrid meteor shower that happens every year on Halloween week that contains so many different people's beliefs on this Day of the Dead concept, where they have this ideal that it's the day of worship, it's the day whenever the veil becomes closer between the dead and the living, the festival of Samhain, Halloween itself that we go off of, and I did a video on this recently. Look it up, it's shows some of these connections and everything too, and I talk about it in that. But this idea too that even can be seen in Mithras and his symbology, where you see the guy in the Phrygian cap and he's stabbing Taurus the bull in the shoulder, and this indeed is again an ideal of the Pleiades and how that goes with farming and different things and aspects. But here we can see this Celtic swirl type thing. We can see a solar disk in some of the earliest of Sumerian art in areas of Mesopotamia, but in that you can see this 336 with this one offset. Sometimes this one's up here with the other one. Other times it's a cluster. And this is of the earliest depictions. And whenever you see some of these, you'll see an odd depiction where it shows a star. Much like we would think of the star today. But it looks kind of like a starfish star, right? That's interesting too, because that's later what the Egyptians start to show on their walls, is something that just looks like an Egyptian, looks like a starfish. It's on there, usually a 5-pointed star. And if you think about the way we draw stars nowadays, it's the same thing, but we draw it thicker. And there's of course a way that you can do it geometrically, where you can go chum 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 and make a star. And then ideas of Capricorn and so on. But oh man, there's that solar boat and crescent over the star too. And does that always mean the sun? Crescent in a moon, does that mean a crescent moon? Or does that have a solar disk aspect go with it too? A lot more often than we think of. But oh man, in this depiction, there they are laid out exactly like on that star disk that was found up in Germany. And that shows the correlation to the ancient Pleiades and these 7 sisters. But there's so much to do with this 7 too, and how that's a godly number, along with 10 of completion, and other people go with many different aspects of that. But there's 7 Apkallu sages that leave out of Sumeria and herald mankind in different places, one of which is a group called the Shemsu Hor. They come into Egypt, and that can be seen with the first dynasties and so on, but they also are looking back at an elder time. So what can this show us there, this disc, and how that works with it? Well, that's that same representation right there. You know, if you look at it now with a telescope, it's just a cluster. But if you peer through it, which one it is, and through the naked eye, that is more of a representation of what you'll get. And this Milky Way concept, that's the birth and the birth area that we have of the cosmos and ancient beliefs, is that, you know, we all spawn from this thing, and there's Mother Earth and Geb and Nut and so on, and Egyptians, and all of these depictions strangely are animistic. People-headed animals. Orion is a hunter, but we find that where we can do things like connect the dots, like when we were a kid. So it's something simplistic for us now to connect the dots. And let's see if we can connect some dots here too for ancient zodiacs that had to do with that. And they more or less are shown as all animals, and we can depict them easy, and we can say this is Sagittarius, here's Pisces, here's this. And they all have this similar zodiac that goes with each other. And that zodiac is across our sky. But in Egypt, they started making these depictions of stars like this. And there are so many different ones of them, and I'll just stop it at this flashpoint. But you can see where things like Orion are shown up, and the symbology goes around it. What is this, and is that a meteor they're talking about, and what goes on? But this literally just looks like a starfish. Recently, was it my Halloween video? No, it was in one of my videos. I just showed some coral reef stuff, and it's the one with the red starfish, I think, at the start of it. I show where I had a little Christmas tree up at work, and I had taken some dried, dehydrated starfish that were bleached and put them around on it, and then a star that I had got in the Bahamas. One day I'll tell the story about how I almost died to get that starfish, but starfish look just like this, and we draw stars exactly like this today. So we're familiar with this sparkling idea, but you say that that star isn't seen in the Sumerians, and that's not true. For the sun that I just showed you a second ago is drawn in an 8-pointed star, and it controls the wheel, and the wheel with the 8-pointed spokes. That is a sun deity type aspect that is shown all the way from India, all the way through Ireland, everywhere. And now the wheel, though, was brought a little later to the Egyptians, right? It came in with those Hyksos, who would have had this Proto-Indo-European contact. And suddenly, things changed for them, for they had recurved bows. They had the wheel and chariot. They had things, and much more aspects go along with it. But strangely, whenever those people came in the Hyksos, they correlated to other gods that were already around them. If you look into it, although they talk about some of them just worshiping a Baal type of god, and certain gods that they worshipped, and that almost sounds like monotheism way before, you know, the idea that we have today, or the Akhenaten adventure that had happened to try to take it to one. And I've shown that in a couple of other videos recently. Here's this solar boat, and it's not in the water. Just like I keep showing you in the ancient Egyptian and the Sumerian, and even in cave art and things, they're dragging this thing across land for some reason. What's that got to do with it? Here's this solar boat, and it's taking you across the Milky Way. And they have that depiction all over Egypt in later times. But what does that all have to do and connect with everything? Well, it has to do with the Milky Way and the only TV that we had at the time, and some special stars that hooked up with certain aspects of life. And maybe this meteor shower that happens around Pleiades has a lot more to do with it than people give credit for. Maybe it's got a lot more to do with ancient belief systems than people want to give credit for. There's this guy here, and I don't know why they doubled up the video and made it look weird, unless they just wanted to play with their video effects. But as he goes in here, I want to show you something for now. That starts to bring things full circle too for us, because what we're seeing here is this chariot of these ancient Scythians and Proto-Indo-Europeans that are bringing the solar disc carried by a chariot. And later this depiction is seen through Greeks and Roman art and so on, and that's what carries the sun across. And we've just recently done a series on Phaethon and how he had perhaps become a sun that struck the earth, and something happened and it burned it up, and it was a way to describe how the season changes and the sun's over us more, but as it goes towards the southern hemisphere, it goes there and burning up the world, and whenever it does so, on a double pass as it comes back to us and them, that area gets burnt up more, and that's one reason for the Sahara Desert, but also Phaethon had come far too close. And I've done one where if you look at this video, at the symbology of this real close, it has all these circles around on it, and that works with a solar and a lunar calendar. And then there are those hats that are giant conical golden hats that they have found through Germany in the same area as this thing is found in this disc, that had that same thing in a calendar, that the later Greeks work out a calendar and it goes right with it too. So this guy here starts to make correlations, and he does stuff about ancient civilizations a lot also, and these solar boat type situations, and where they have certain stars around them and something is just carved into marble or something symbol, and goes back to cave art. It goes way back, and while that kind of looked like Jacob's ladder, I think you can see here that this is a boat, and there's some people in there, and we've looked at enough cave art, if you've been with me, and I entice you to go back and look through a lot of the things that I show in cave art, knowledge in cave art. But there are people on these, and they're traveling through the stars in a boat. And isn't that cool? You can imagine that these people are somehow in their mind playing Star Trek and the ancient cosmic journey that they make in the afterlife. Right? And strangely, this depiction is one that's special. It shows a sled. It shows a sled like Santa Claus, but on that sled is that damn boat. And it's being led and pulled through the sky. And these stars are drawn special there, for it shows them different sizes. And there's even ones where there are giant depictions, and they have these delineations of people and oars. Sometimes it's just dots of people, sometimes it's just oars. But also you can see that these are stars, and these people are stars with oars, and they're going through this solar sky and this Milky Way and traveling through it. And there's a crescent type depiction, but there's one too. So is that the moon? Well, this looks like done on purposely, and that might be slightly scuffed. But there's another one here, and that one's got a missing piece, and so on. But I think we can see the depiction that I'm showing here, and how it works all together in some ways, and how he found all these ancient connections. And so in doing so, and this is from a guy that specializes from Denmark, and whenever we look closely at this boat, it is shown, whereas sometimes we've seen in my cave art depictions, there are sticks in here that look like people, and you can see there are many, many sticks. Many, many sticks. Somebody said that it starts being rubbed out at a certain point, but idea is that there's 360 of them. That's just, I'm not going to sit and count them either. I think it's nowhere near adds to that. I think what somebody else said was he's adding up everyone that you can discern from the top, and the bottom and getting that number out of it. But it would have been like oars, and we can see these oars in this boat. And see these 3 stars that sit cradled in the boat? Notice anything strange about them? How the middle one is about off kick just a little bit, and it really comes across as being the lineup of the belt of Orion. And so now we have this Aryan Orion solar boat going on with these people. And now we have a connection in ancient times, which this is dating to 1600 BC or so. But it shows a connection from boating in ancient Sumerians and reed boats and turned up reed boats that even are found in South America and so on, but also in the Phoenician boats, and later in depictions of Viking boats, and how on one end it has a face or a head of a creature. Quite often later it's dragons and so on. So they get this astronomer here, and he's looking at it and figuring it out. And why is this offset? Well, there's a reason that it's offset. And it's offset by a certain amount of the in degrees. From being the exact center here to where the focal point is a certain amount out. Amazingly upon that too, if you were to take and put that and aim a piece at this point, here, back to this point, back to this point down, this becomes a depiction of a man holding a bow and a pulled back and extended bow with some power ready to release in it. But even better yet, guys, even better yet, around this edge we have declamations and dots that are inset into it also, that are different and not the notches that you see in any way on the solar boat, right? They're not these little paddle people that are in a multi-lined looking reed boat, or maybe made out of wood. For now, let me make another correlation. We found now recently 35 feet under the water, out a ways, off the Isle of Wight, an ancient boat dock that was built in 8000 BC. And that's just rough estimates starting off with dating of when the water could have been that low after the Younger Dryas event, and where it's up, but not where its full point is today, where it rose up to. And it talks about flooding and stuff in the Bible, and that definitely shows you 35 foot. What does that mean? The 35 foot deep water, no one could stand up. 35 foot deep water, everybody's moving, and with everybody on shore at this time, and having a lot to do with boats, which whenever I was a kid, we're led to believe maybe they invented a boat in Egypt, and they only had those and they're little bitty things, and they go up and down. And those Phoenicians, man, they made a little better boat, and man, they had some mercantile going on. And is that what you were led to believe too? Yeah. Then we come to find out, man, they've got boats like this and these depictions that I'm showing you right here that go back 16,000 BC easy. That's well into the Ice Age. Well into the Ice Age. But you look at that ancient boat dock. Well, so focal pointing here off of this, they actually get something like 52 degrees. I'm sorry, 82 degrees. Pardon me. 82 degrees is kind of showing something also, especially for the area that it comes in. But these dents that go around the outside of it, for they seem to be placed in exacting points for a reason. And so that even in itself is something that you line up, and then it helps you line up things and tells you when it's coming and when you should, where you should look at this representation. So there's at least 3 things going on this at once. But this depiction here in 82 degrees declamates the farthest that the sun goes in winter and the farthest it goes in summer, and the declamation of them. But then also, amazingly, there's 9 dots around on this, like 9 moons. It's also gestation period of a woman, and it shows it again here on this side here. of having a child. And so now we've got the moon with moon 9 lunar hook up to it too, solar calendar, declamations, all kinds of things are starting to be found out of this. So you have to watch the sun, and it doesn't fall straight. It does it at an angle, and it zigzags back, but its reaching point sometimes are declamated by mountains, and there would be the farthest point of summer, and then as we reach winter, it would be its farthest point here. And that is 82 degrees that they show there. But what's weird about that is that's not 82 degrees. It's not where the sun sets. It's different for the Egyptians. And it's less. And it's closer to 52 degrees, which is amazingly the declination of the pyramids. But if you go farther north, it can be as much as 90 degrees, and you'll actually get to the point where now then it's all dark for part of the year, and then the sun isn't even seen, and then it's all light for part of the year too. So you reach past a point in the Arctic Circle. I think we're familiar with that idea. But this concept here of when it goes at 82 degrees that it shows here, and the sun goes across, where does that go? Where is that on the planet that you can find this 82 degrees? Is it around the Mediterranean? Well, answer is no. Actually, right where this object is found in this band through here, that you will find that it goes 82 degrees. Now, how they figured out, other than gold analysis, even initially, that this was done in phases and from gold from different places, is because they saw a few anomalies, which you might see. They're actually a doubled up star, like either they made a mistake and changed where it went, or this is supposed to depict the sun coming up and rising, or something, but you'd think it would have more. But this is the only one that is overstamped and wrong, and it's put in there. And they say this gold here is one that's different than all the other golds. But also, if you'll look, there's a divot that's under there, a star, and a divot that's under there. So it was put on later. Now this gold shows up to be from a different place. One of them is from Austria. The bronze that shows up in the background is actually made from Cornwall, and the tin that's in there also. Right? And so we've got two kinds of gold that's going on here. And then the composition of the metal that originally is. So let's get into this article here real quick. This is the Secrets of the Nebra Sky Disc. And I'd like to mention, whenever I first heard about this, it made me think of Nebraska and how its fertile plains and how this correlates to farming. Really means something perhaps too, but this Nebra Star Disc is 3,600-year-old bronze disc, which according to UNESCO features the oldest concrete depiction of the cosmic phenomena worldwide of anybody. The disc is such an extraordinary piece that it was initially believed to be an archaeological forgery. However, detailed scientific analysis revealed that it was indeed authentic, and that the precious artifact is now included in UNESCO's Memory of the World Register, an international initiative launched to safeguard and documentary heritage of humanity, and is being held at the State Museum of Prehistory in Halle. They say that it's the oldest concrete depiction of cosmic phenomenon, but I've shown you cave depictions that actually show you Taurus and the Pleiades and Orion on a cave wall that they date back many thousands of years. And this is caveman art. And yet, Taurus is correct. And on the wall are spots that are going down the wall, declimating where the sun reaches to at the maximum of this season and that season. Perhaps they're still seasonal themselves at that time and migrating back and forth, and they know this. But then when you see that sun declination, it says maybe these people lived in this cave year-round, and they weren't migratory. And that probably led to people trying to make their own caves and their own buildings wherever they went. Right? Let's continue. The Nebra Sky Disc, or Star Disc, was discovered in 1999 by two amateur treasure hunters illegally using a metal detector in Zilgudras Forest, Saxony-Anhalt in Germany. I guess it's illegal to treasure hunt or try to use a metal detector there to find anything. And that's kind of sad, actually, if you think about it, for how do you find little things like this, and is it just accidents? Well, I think the reason why is because quite often whenever people find things like this, it doesn't show up. In fact, it was trying to be sold illegally on the black market whenever it was found, and found by a museum guy that's in part of that video that I'm showing there, and they actually did a sting to the guy and got it from him and then ended up taking him to jail and so on and everything, and I think that's a wrong way to do things too. Although he was trying to sell things on the black market, but you can see how this all goes. For museums would pay great money for things like this whenever they even start to look into it. And so treasure hunters nowadays are, look, it's a different thing, and it's not pirates and ARG and trying to find ships, and there's all this hierarchy and bureaucracy that goes along with it. It had been ritually buried in prehistoric enclosure atop of a hill, the Mittenberg, Mittelberg, along with two precious swords, two axes, two arm spiral rings, so armbands that wrap around your arms, like in the Sumerians, a lot of people had, and one bronze chisel. The enclosure is oriented in such a way that sun seems to set every solstice behind the Brocken, the highest peak of the Harz Mountains, some 80 kilometers to the northwest. And so here's that declination that you're talking about. The surrounding area is known to have been settled since the Neolithic. Zilgudras Forest is said to contain around 1,000 barrows in between it, and perhaps from looting and things that they have tried to steer away from it. Interestingly, here are part of the bronze swords that were ended up found with the disc, and you can see they're well made with a center spline that is much stronger and only sharpened on the edge. You can still see that it has some edging on it. This is also a declamation of swords, and I have a book, The Art of Armor and The Art of Swordmanship, just right here handy. But you can see swords go from a point like this, and this is a small sword, in between a dagger, one-handed sword, small thing, much like Sting is for Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings and type concepts. But there are rivets right here that are done into it, and for a while they have these riveting where they have a handle joined to it, and it's riveted through it. And we can understand that in modern technology, but later they start to make them even solid. And they still use this idea of riveting to make that symbolic look to it, even though it doesn't have it anymore. The handle here has a gold ring around it too, also, with the pommel and hilt are known as the tang. Quite often they were round. That's part of the reason the fish that are round are called tangs, but that's in the fish. And this would have been wrapped with leather, wet whenever it was wrapped with it like rawhide, and dried out to tighten, and so on. Now, the scientific studies of the Nebra hoard are probably among the most thorough ever carried out on an archaeological find in Europe. Study began when the objects were first impounded in 2002 and continued until the end of 2007. Nonetheless, dating the artifact has posed many difficulties, and while scientists have been able to determine that it was buried at 1600 BC, they're unable to determine its date of manufacture. meaning it could be much older than its burial date. And it looks to appear to be so. And how much older could it be? It could be hundreds and hundreds of years older than that. The Nebra bronze disc measures approximately 30 centimeters in diameter and weighs 2.2 kilograms exactly, which is a strange declamation for it. And it's decorated with a blue-green patina and inlaid with gold symbols. But in ancient times it was black with gold stars onto it. These are interpreted as generally as sun or a full moon and a lunar crescent and stars, including a cluster interpreted as the Pleiades. We just talked about other interpretations there and what these people have found versus the vagueness this guy is giving in his statement. 2 golden arcs along the sides were added, as one has become lost on the left. These were constructed from a gold of different origin, though, as shown by its chemical impurities. 2 arcs span an angle of 82 degrees, correctly indicating the angle between the positions of sunset and summer and winter